vintage IV or Ametora? If you're looking to pick up an OCBD from Kamakura, that's the big question. So in this video, we'll be comparing this blue OCBD from the vintage IV collection with this white OCBD from the Ametora collection, which, full transparency, Kamakura sent both t-shirts to me. At first glance, they look pretty similar, but as always, the devil's in the details. The vintage IV is a collaboration with Graham Marsh, offering a lineup of mainly shirts inspired by what American college students wore in the 60s, while the Ametora collection pays homage to the dress shirts commonly worn in Madison Avenue in the 50s. So, which is the better buy? Well, let's find out. As far as Oxford cloths go, I'd say they're both a happy medium in that they are neither too thick nor too rough, really just a versatile 3-season fabric. Now, what's unique about this particular Ametora shirt is the selvage. It runs down the front placket, and for that little detail, it'll cost you $30 more. Is that extra cost worth it? Well, personally, I wouldn't pay more for something just because it's selvage, but in this case, it does translate to a noticeably airier and softer hand. But that's not the only difference you're getting. There are also the subtle details. Okay, starting with what is perhaps the most important part of an OCBD, the collar. The vintage IV has a 3-inch point length, feels like there's a floating interlining, and the button on the back lends itself a sportier vibe, while the Ametora has a longer 3.5-inch point length and is unlined. You'd think the longer point length on the Ametora would result in a more pronounced collar roll, but for some reason, the vintage IV has in fact a more voluminous roll and as a result, a more casual charm, in my opinion. On the other hand, the less curvy roll on the Ametora looks more at home under a tailor jacket, which I guess isn't surprising given it's based on dress shirts. Similarly, the placket and cuffs on the vintage IV have a floating interlining, while the Ametora is unlined. Visually speaking, there's not much of a difference. But if you like to roll up your sleeves, the vintage IV definitely holds a roll better. Both shirts also feature details like a buttonless sleeve placket, 6 buttons on the front placket instead of the typical 7, and an arrowhead finishing at the bottom of the placket. I've read in some places that a 6-button placket is more prone to becoming untucked, but as long as you're wearing high-waisted trousers, I'd say it's no less of an issue compared to your normal shirts. That aside, the wider 4-inch spacing between the buttons and the gathered effects on the cuffs on the Ametora comes across as more loose, more relaxed compared to the 3.5-inch spacing and the typical 2-pleat cuffs on the vintage IV. Okay, next, the buttons. They are not shanked and the buttonholes aren't the most cleanly finished, but overall, still acceptable. The vintage IV uses Takase shell buttons, and on the Ametora it's mother of pearl. Functionally, they are practically the same. Aesthetically, you can see the Ametora has a more pronounced indentation and a more lustrous, dynamic shine compared to the vintage IV, which has a flatter surface, though a clearer shine. On the back, both shirts feature a box pleat, with the vintage IV sporting a locker loop, while the Ametora does away with it. And in terms of construction, they're both well made. You've got sturdy felt seams, both cleanly finished on the inside and out. Interestingly, the felt seams are narrower and the hem is a touch wider on the vintage IV, but again, not much of a practical difference. Unfortunately, even Kamakura's smaller size is way too long for me. So, if you haven't already noticed, I've been using my 1.83 meter friend here who usually wears a size large. As you can see, for the same size 15.5, the Ametora fits fuller in every dimension. It's got a larger chest, armhole, collar, waist, and longer sleeves, so you could maybe even size down to get a trimmer fit. The vintage IV on the other hand is cut closer, though if you are used to wearing slim fits, you'll probably still think it fits rather full. Also, if it matters to you, the Ametora has a slightly longer chest pocket. Can't say I prefer one or the other. Either way, both pockets look proportional on their respective cuts. Unless you're one of those IV connoisseurs who nut out on the details, I feel like style-wise, there aren't many meaningful differences. Well, apart from the collar. In other words, if you're a layman like me, I'd say just go with the fabric and fit you prefer, because regardless, you're getting a quality, fairly priced, made in Japan shirt. Unfortunately, neither shirts fit me, but if they do, I'd definitely go with the Ametora, mostly because the collar goes better with tailoring. So yeah, that's that. For more shirt reviews, go click on one of these. Okay, until next time, stay sato.